until all have heard.
There's a question I keep coming back to this season. What happens to a person after they go? Not during the trip, but after. When the flight lands, the bags are unpacked, and ordinary life resumes. What did the experience leave behind? I'm Andy Bachert, and this is FIA's podcast, Till All Have Heard. Friends in Action International exists to move Earth so heaven can be shared. And Season 2 is built around the people who've experienced that firsthand. Today's guest is Darren Cook. He's a short-term mission team traveler, and he was a short-term missions team traveler who now works for us. He's in training to become the first ever Canadian team coordinator for FIA. And he and his wife, Mary, are in the middle of raising their full-time support to make that role a reality. But before all that, there's a backstory, a real one. And it starts in a place you might not expect. See, Darren's wife, Mary, grew up Mennonite, but she converted. A man who chose one of the most counterculture communities in North America, a community that draws a hard line between itself and the outside world, is now spending his life helping people cross that line to serve strangers in Central America and around the world. I want to understand how that happens. So Darren, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's start, Darren, with a little bit of your backstory. Before FIA, before mission trips, I want to start with you and Mary. Tell me a little bit about your background and how the two of you came together.
Sure. I was raised in Ontario, Canada, as was Mary. She was raised in a Mennonite setting. I was raised in, I would say, atheist by default. We weren't planning on being atheists. We just, I guess we weren't planning on keeping on going to the Baptist church that we grew up in. So when we moved to the city when I was 5, we stopped going to church. And I really didn't give it any thought after that. I didn't think of heaven or hell. Jesus was a swear word, and so I just grew up as a worldly city kid. And by the time I had finished high school, I had gotten into quite a few contrary lifestyle habits, drinking and drugs and some minor crime, and wasn't able to take the traditional path of university with my lack of interest in school. But I always wanted to work on a farm. So I saw help wanted on a dairy farm out in a little town called Millbank. Not even sure if I'd ever really left the city. Didn't know anything about farming, but had this strange desire. And anyway, we went and met with the owners and got the job. And part of that job was boarding there. And so every other weekend I would go home. And the interesting thing was it turns out that family were Mennonites, which I had never heard of.
Okay. So you never heard of Mennonites before that time?
No. I was a very unworldly educated city kid, I guess, for outside of my sphere.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about then the connection between you and your wife, Mary.
Yeah. So this gentleman, Gary Lichty, specifically tried to hire a worldly city kid to win him for the Lord, which is what he began doing. So I'll just back up a little bit just to give the background of how I met Mary. Mm-hmm. So Gary started telling me about Jesus, and I was in the middle of a pretty exciting science fiction book right then. I didn't think I was going to put it down, but I ended up doing that and picking up the Bible first time at 19. And I started reading the New Testament, probably in John somewhere, I don't remember, but I just couldn't believe the character of this person, Jesus Christ. Forgiveness. I never heard of forgiveness growing up. It was always how you can get back at the people you didn't like, and loving your enemy, and just love, joy, and peace, and all these concepts that were very much lacking in my life. And so he kept on telling me about the Lord. And I remember there's one situation where he had a section of barn where the cattle were the rear ends of the cattle were really close to the wall, and you had to go behind them to get the milker on. It seemed like this one cow just had it in for me. It would stick its tail in the urine and that, and just try to swat me in the face. And I remember I had a pitchfork and I jabbed the cow, and I looked, and then Gary was looking right at me. Didn't say a word. And I was used to getting yelled at growing up. And so this was strange to me that he didn't get after me. I learned my lesson, but so their unique way of life just I kept asking why. Why are they doing this? Why are they like this? And they told me more about the Lord. And eventually I got to the place where I realized that if Jesus is real, then I'm going to hell. If Jesus is real, then there is an eternity. And if he's the Son of God, then I'm a sinner and I have to make a decision. And I remember I went home on the weekend and I was just miserable. I was still getting drunk with my friends, but it wasn't fun anymore. Then I came back to the farmhouse and at the start of a new week on a Sunday, and they were having some nationwide church meetings. So they said a note on the table I could go to those meetings. And then the bishop who was paying attention of the church, they call them bishops there, asked if he could come back with me that night. And he came back to the farmhouse and said, Darren, are you ready to repent? And at this time, I had understood now what repentance is and so forth, and I was just ready. So we got down and knelt down on the floor in the little country house out in the country, and I didn't know how to pray, and he just said, talk to God. So I confessed my sins and what I thought of a sin right then, and when I got up from that prayer, I knew I was changed. And if it wasn't for that change, this is a long introduction, I wouldn't have been able to meet Mary. Because through that change, I ended up finding out I'm not much of a farmer. And but now I'm working with the church group there, and I ended up working for Mary's brother-in-law, who was a butcher. And that's how I met Mary.
Okay. Okay. Very good. So you met Mary through her brother.
Yeah. Brother-in-law.
Okay. Brother-in-law.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell me then a little bit about what that was like joining the Mennonite order and being part of that community.
Yeah. It was very counterculture to how I grew up, for sure, to the point where my parents and my brothers and sisters, when they heard about it, they thought this can't be. They tried to talk me out of it. If you're going to be a Christian, try to be a normal one. I remember my mom and dad came and met with the ministry, and they sat down and said to them, we used to have 4 children, now we have 3. So they thought by maybe that shock of disowning me or so on, that would help me come back. But I knew what I had found, and I didn't know what a Baptist or a Pentecostal or anything else was. But in the setting of the Mennonites, I found Jesus, and I wasn't going back. So so I lost all my high school friends. At first they thought it was a phase, and they would try to see if I'd come out of this. But once they discovered it was real, then that was kind of the end of those relationships.
So fast forward, you met Mary. You guys obviously got married. Tell me a little bit about when you got married. Was it still in the Mennonite order, or had you kind of went toward the evangelical side? What does that?
No, we had a long run yet in the plain circles or the Anabaptist circles. Our marriage was very non-typical. It's very difficult for a convert or somebody with a different last name than Martin or Brubaker or whatever your Mennonite group you're in to marry a Mennonite girl. So we actually had an Amish bishop from Ohio have to come up and sit down all of Mary's ministry in order for us to proceed to get married. Okay. So we got married in Mary's dad's church. And like I said, that was kind of that was still the start of the uphill climb of living the plain life. Yeah.
Interesting. So we're, again, Lancaster County, Mennonite and Amish orders are pretty well known down here and established.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what that looked like for our viewers for coming in, being in Canada.
Yeah, the Mennonite and Amish groups in Canada are very small compared to what you have in Ohio and Lancaster. And actually, before we got married, I had to move to Ohio to kind of escape some of the pressures of dealing with the desire to get married with Mary. We had to get, like I said, an Amish bishop from Ohio to help out. But I think that there's I don't know if it's fully this way in the States, but in Canada, there's a very strong dilemma in what's called the conservative Mennonite church. So they would feel like they're not horse and buggy, so they're not too plain, but they're not liberal, so they're just kind of right in the right position. And they would like to be evangelical, so they would talk about the gospel quite a bit and sing at old folks' homes, hand out tracts. But they're terrified of getting a convert. because the converts ask way too many questions. Why do we do this? Why do we do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me then a little bit about the conversion out of the Mennonite society and then into evangelical work. We'll get into your ministry here shortly, but tell me about what that was like for you and Mary and your family.
Yeah, so we ended up going much plainer, ended up joining an old order group in Tennessee that was somewhat communal, but the hook there was that it was evangelical. So there was ex-Catholics, Baptists, Pentecostals, Amish, Mennonite, all trying to live a ultra plain life, horse and buggy, no running water. I was the harness maker.
Okay.
And we were actually sent out. The church actually laid hands on myself and my friend Jonathan and sent us out to preach the gospel, where we just started walking. We didn't know where we were going to stay that night, and came back 2 weeks later. And at this point, I had also was introduced to the writings of a man named David Rousseau, who brought out the writings of the ante-Nicene fathers, so the early church, first 2 or 3, 4 centuries. And you have to understand, not growing up in a Christian home and not really knowing anything other than what I was saved in, Mennonites. In the Mennonite church, they wouldn't necessarily say it, but you would catch the teaching of plainness as holiness. So the more you deny yourself, it's more of an indication of your love for the Lord. And so, being a worldly city kid, I thought I can be way plainer than this, and that's what led us to the sort of the end of the line horse and buggy evangelical group. My wife knew a little better than I did. Her parents had left that type of setting, but not in an evangelical flavor. Anyway, after we got back from preaching and spreading the gospel there was a situation where there was 2 young women in an Indian reserve who wanted help, but they were terrified of horses. And I was coming to the conclusion that to help people, we had to convert them twice. Once to Christ and once to lifestyle. Okay. And then reading the early Christian writings where Justin Martyr said the church didn't differ in customs, culture, or language than the people around them. We were striking out on most of those points. And I discovered that I'm as plain as I can be, and the desire for evangelism or the fruit of the gospel isn't any greater than it was way back at the beginning. And it's kind of like a bunch of things came together then. We couldn't help those girls because the community wasn't willing to change on the cultural aspects with the horses and so forth. Reading the early Christian writings and then seeing the lack of fruit in other people's lives towards evangelism all came together. And Mary and I, who were leading people to that group, came to the place that we're willing to go. And we had heard of a new group in Pennsylvania, very close to here, Charity Christian Fellowship, that was kind of a mix between Amish and Baptist. And at this point, we still thought there was some perfect hybrid out there who were very evangelical. We got my license back, drove down, met with them. They kind of deputized us to start a church back in Ontario, and we packed all our belongings with $20 extra in a U-Haul and moved back to Ontario and started over.
Wow.
And so that was still not quite into the evangelical world. We started that church, and then it became the fastest growing of what they called their remnant churches. And they wanted us to align more with their vision. Their vision was more to reach out to the lost in the Mennonite world. Our vision was to reach the lost in the world. So they wanted us to, for instance, not commune every Sunday, because the Mennonites have a hard time accepting that as treating it with proper holiness. A few other issues, which I eventually saw that I was going to be standing in the way of what they really wanted, which forced us into the next thing that we could find, which was a church where some friends of ours who were sort of half Mennonite, half not, went to, which was a Brethren church. It was way too worldly for us at that point because we were still thinking Mennonite even though we thought we had left.
Yeah.
So it took about 5 or 6 years to maybe stop thinking in a Mennonite vein and for people to stop calling us Mennonites. And then we've been in that setting for 25 years. Okay.
Very good. Interesting. So I appreciate that backstory. I know we could probably talk a lot longer about some of the experiences you and Mary have had through that process and things, and praise the Lord that you're here today with us. Tell me a little bit about then your first experience in the ministry. I know before you came to FIA, you were with another mission organization. Go ahead and share a little bit about that.
Yeah, in fact, even further back, the first experience was in just after being converted in '87. The Mennonite group we were in did have a church in Guatemala, and we went there. And I remember thinking, I want to lose my passport and just stay. Just falling in love with the reality of seeing needs met that are real needs. In North America, we think we have a lot of needs, but they're not near as clear as in some other parts of the world. And then going to Brazil, let's jump up a bit, with the whole family. That was an orphanage ministry, and just seeing how we could spend our days doing the same things we do in North America, clothing ourselves, feeding ourselves, making a living, but do it there and make an impact in all the lives of those kids. So I think that anytime a Christian who knows what they've been saved from and knows the needs out there finds themselves in a situation where they can be more effective in meeting those needs and spreading the gospel, is going to feel a rush of desire and longing to be a part of that.
So let's land there for a minute or two. Even though it wasn't your first trip as an FIA trip, I think you can speak into some of the cultural experience and just your first experience on a short-term missions trip to that church. You did explain a little bit there as you were unpacking it, but for the listeners that may be kind of on the fence, maybe have never traveled outside the U.S., not comfortable or quite understand what the experience might be. I mean, that was you many years ago.
Yeah.
What was your first thoughts about entering into that different culture? I mean, you explained you were from a very plain culture. Now you're actually leaving the United States and ministering in another country.
Yeah, I think that some of the people's concerns are, even as a Canadian, sometimes we would have concerns, or people we would meet that were afraid to go into the States. And especially I was born in Windsor and tended to be safer at night in Windsor than in Detroit. And so, but until we actually moved to Ohio and realized, it's just as safe here as anywhere else, you battle those concepts in your mind. So I think a lot of people just assume that by going to a third world country somewhere that they're taking a very heavy risk. And sure, even just leaving your own county, if you're used to your own hospitals or something, it might be different. If you break your arm, you would like to go to the hospital, or your own family doctor. But I think the idea that missionaries are normal people who also don't want to get hurt going somewhere, and that mission organizations invest a lot of time in making sure that trips are safe and people are well prepared. I think that goes a long way to helping people get over their fears of travel to other countries. Does that is that?
Yeah,
sort of
it does. Yeah. So then coming back into the States after that experience, we talk sometimes on the program here about reverse cultural shock.
Yeah.
You've experienced a whole different culture. Now you're going back into the North American mindset. Share with the listeners a little bit about that.
Well, I think that everybody's going to process those things differently. We probably have faced more culture shock leaving the old order group and going back to a normal lifestyle than any mission trip I've been on.
Okay.
I remember just from going from horse and buggy to car again, just how fast it seemed we were coming up to a stop sign before we stopped. And just getting used to electric lights versus coal oil lanterns. So I believe that probably the biggest thing people are going to face is realizing they have it better than they realize. When you go somewhere where people are happy and have very little and you come back, suddenly your house isn't too small anymore. Maybe that addition you were thinking doesn't have to be as extravagant. I think that's maybe more of the culture of the shock people face, just realizing that they really have a lot of things to be thankful for.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing that. So let's fast forward to your ministry time with Ethnos 360.
Yeah.
Explain to our listeners how you got introduced to that, and then where in the world you and Mary had ministered at.
Yeah. So the director of Ethnos in Canada, Tim Watley, was at the same church that we were going to. And the campus there It's 100 acres, has quite a few buildings, and was always needing help with maintenance. And there was a time frame where they had an opening, and then Tim approached us and asked if we would come and take up that spot. And I had always felt that if I'm going to be in construction anyway, it's kind of been my fallback job. I've done a lot of different things, but if I'm going to be hammering nails, I'd rather hammer nails that are going to help the kingdom more than just my own self. So anyway, it took a little bit of time to get there and raise support, and ended up being co-campus director. And so most of our stay was right there in Ontario, in Durham, but we went with the Suttons, friends of ours, to Papua New Guinea for a month to help them transition back to the home base as they were leaving the mission field. And definitely saw and entered into the world of missions for unreached people groups just through the interaction with the students and the training at the campus and so forth.
Good. So then that led you to international ministry as well. So tell us a little bit about where you and Mary had worked and ministered.
It was actually before that so we went from when we left the Mennonite world and entered into the evangelical world, so to speak, we ended up in Brazil, and that was our main focus on the international ministry, and all 6 children. So I would say our kids would say that's where they gained the burden of reaching the lost, evangelism, basically the heart of Jesus, and established their future Christian walk. And that we jumped into that maybe with not going through the whole training procedure, not realizing the whole backstory of what missionaries do to prepare for that. We're a pretty spontaneous family, and that's just how it worked. And then it was after that we joined Ethnos.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And did the work there.
Okay. So then your work at Ethnos, again, using hands-on construction, very similar to what Friends in Action does. Tell me about the introduction to Friends in Action from Ethnos then.
Yeah, so it was just as COVID hit, we were getting ready to build a gymnasium, and Matt Durkee, the director of Friends in Action, wasn't able to really send teams or go out internationally, and there had been a loose connection between Friends in Action and Ethnos over the years. And Matt, I think, got in touch with Tim, and they kind of reconnected and decided they would see if they could find some projects to work on. So Matt offered to help project manage with myself on the gymnasium.
Okay.
And so we emailed quite a bit, and we're on the phone quite a bit. We met each other a few times, and we just got to know each other and kind of became friends. And then when COVID lessened up, Matt had to continue on with other things, and I kept on with the gym. But he had always said, and probably jokingly, because not knowing what the future would hold, but if the Lord ever opens the door, or if we're leaving Ethnos, that to look and come His way. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was realizing that, like I said, I'll probably be hammering nails or doing carpentry for the rest of my life until I have to stop. And I had done a lot for 7 years there in Durham, but I still felt that I was more suited to doing this somewhere in a third world country, probably because of those years of living old order and being content with less.
Yeah, sure.
So that desire you've started to build, that maybe the Friends in Action would actually be a better fit for our experience.
Okay, good. So then at some point, Matt and you had solidified that relationship between you guys and Friends in Action.
Yes.
Tell me about that, kind of the next steps, introduction into Friends in Action. Had you gone on a short-term missions trip with Friends in Action at some point?
Yeah, so we just stayed in touch with Matt over the time of leaving, and he was able to talk to the leaders at Ethnos and be filled in with how things are going and why we're leaving and so forth. There's a bit of a backstory there, but not necessarily important. Mm-hmm. But anyway, he paid close interest to Mary and I and how this might work. And as doors kept opening and seeming like it was the right direction to go, I think we met some of the board members, came to some of the, I think the Christmas banquet, met some of the other people, and sort of like the discerning process if this was a good fit. And then I think the first trip went on, which might have been, I guess you could say, is the deal maker or deal breaker to see how somebody actually responds on a mission trip.
Yeah,
so it was the Bolivia trip.
Okay.
And that was pretty good. I remember, I think there was maybe one time on the boat we were really tired, and Matt said something, and I maybe said something back, and it was like, oh, was that a bit of tension or what? You know, but I think that was pretty. It was a pretty good trip, and so I think we saw each other at the. If that was all the tension there was going to be, and when we were tired and hungry and mosquito bitten and everything else, then I think it was a pretty good indicator that things could work out.
Yeah, let's talk about that Bolivia trip for a minute. It was one that you got to experience with Matt, a survey trip out into the bush. A very difficult place to access for sure, and we had a request to survey for a bush airstrip. Tell a little bit, unpack that story a little bit about, what it took to get there, and just what your first kind of thoughts were as like, oh wow, this is a for real project.
Yeah. So we flew into, well, first of all, we had some hard flights from the States. We had some hurricanes to go around and different things, but that can happen anywhere. And but when we got to Bolivia, we took a 4-seater Cessna. I think that was a 4-hour trip to get to a pickup truck. That was a 10-hour trip. To get to a smaller boat, that was a 14-hour trip. And the 5 men in a boat, and this boat was not a tourist boat with a mattress.
Yeah, I remember seeing pictures.
I thought, boy, we could even put a few more boards on the bottom of this thing so we could lay down better. But we were sandwiched in there, and I thought, boy, this is the real deal. This is hardcore mission work getting to this place. And but I was actually quite excited, disappointed that project didn't go through. But it would have entailed probably starting in a tent to get accommodations done and bringing everything in and so forth. But for me, that was like, I was like, all right, this is what I'm looking for.
That's cool.
This excites me.
Yeah. Good. Well, now working with team coordinating and you've been doing some team leadership to Central America and doing some well drilling there. Share a little bit about your heart for that project, drilling wells in the village where we've been going, and you've been leading teams there recently. You just got back just last week from that location. Help us understand a little bit about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the team coordinating piece.
Yeah, I think part of my passion in that work is not only the work, but bringing people there who may not have thought that they were the kind to go. And so what I mean by that is that especially with a church planting ministry, you'll have 2 years of Bible school and then maybe 2 years of training in linguistics, and you're almost like a preacher that's going forth. And not everybody has that calling, not everybody has that gifting, but there's a lot of people who can work and do the blue collar trades who don't see themselves as church planters and therefore don't think they'll ever get called on a mission trip. And so part of my passion is I like to see these individuals go, because I do think that it gives them that bump in their faith to come home and be revitalized and seek the Lord deeper. But as far as the trips in Central America, it's very encouraging to see a church that is growing but has that vibrancy that gives you the courage that they can grow and will grow. And the cultural differences, of course, are immense, and I've been doing this long enough that you can learn to put away the North American ideas and the more North American maybe quickness of doing things and so forth, and realize that we're not the only culture out there, or even or even that everything about our culture is the best. It's there's a lot of things you can learn. So I think the the aspect of bringing people there to experience something new that's going to encourage the Christian life and being able to help strengthen the church there are probably the two most exciting things that we deal with.
Yeah, I think it's funny when you mention, like, and we say this often about North American problems, where you're ministering to, where you led teams to, I think there's only one area in that village where you can get some type of cell phone signal. When you're in the village, you have nothing. Yeah. And, here in North America, we get upset because our emails aren't fetching fast enough, or our internet's not working fast enough, or we have to drive down the street to get gasoline or something like that, where it's just a whole different culture when you're without.
That's right.
And you don't know any better. And to experience that for a few weeks and then come back into that North American setting, like you said, it gives you a new appreciation for that. So as far as the process that you're in right now for becoming the team coordinator for the Canada office, what does that look like for you?
Well, I think the main area of focus right now is raising a team. And I didn't say raising support, which is part of that team, because I've gone through a phase where in previous works where I looked at it more as support, that once we had the support, then we would do the work. And I think I didn't quite understand the need of the team. So can I explain that by saying that when you're working in your own country, close to home, with your own culture, you, at least for me, you feel like your own strength is sufficient to some ways, where you don't expect to get malaria going down the road to fix the roof. Where when you start working around the world, you realize there's a lot more things can happen, not to scare anyone, but a lot more things can happen. And the spiritual battle seems to be more real. At least for me, that's been my experience. And so it's made me realize that I need a team, people who pray. And so part of that is me communicating accurately what we're doing and when, so that people can pray. And I like to have a team that's committed. So when we go to Central America or somewhere, they're going to pray each day for that whole time. Because I know it's easy to say we're going to pray for somebody and then forget to do it. Yeah. Or people have a lot of other things to pray about in their lives, but I want to be that focus at least for that 2-week period. And but obviously without the support, we can't go. So how that looks now is having the courage as a man to realize we can't do this alone, and being willing to ask people to consider if they would join in this effort. And it's funny, my mentality is I tend to think that if I want to join in an effort, I'll go tell them, and they don't even have to ask me. And I'm that kind of person. So I think that if people haven't come to me, they don't want to do it. And I'm realizing, no, they actually, some of them want to, and they're just waiting for me to come, and because they want to feel like I want them to be part of it. So it's the most unique part in the missionary life of getting going, and everyone's had to go through it that are in faith-based missions, as you yourself well know. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit, why is it important for Canada to have a team coordinator?
Well, I think Betty, who is the counterpart here, she does a real good job. And I could say, well, she could just do North America. But I think what I see and envision is that Friends in Action is a ministry that, even though it's been around for a while, seems to me to be hitting a growing curve. And I am looking at the vision with the others in Friends in Action, that we're going to have a lot of work and need a lot of people. And there's a lot of churches that haven't heard of Friends in Action. And so I'm kind of excited to change that and to have hundreds of construction workers and on a list of skills that are willing to go, and get team leaders raised up. And hopefully that'll give enough work for Betty and I both to be busy.
Yeah, that's good. And we've seen team participation out of Canada increase as well in the last year or two. There's more
Right.
people hearing about Friends in Action as the office grows and more awareness activities up there.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be great to have additional staff like yourself in the Canadian office.
Right.
Oftentimes when we combine even flights and currency, there's a challenge from when the U.S. is doing all the coordinating. So I know it's going to be a blessing to Betty to have a counterpart in Canada as
Yeah.
well. So tell me a little bit about the support raising piece. How are you and Mary doing, and how can people get to hear from you or know how to help support that or join your prayer team?
Yeah, I think we're roughly maybe at 50%. It's a little hard sometimes to know where we're at with support because some people support monthly, some yearly, some a one-time gift. Probably from the missionary standpoint, the monthly support is the easiest to track. Then you kind of have an idea of what you're dealing with each month. Just figure if you're working for someone and your boss 1 month gave you 60%, another month 90%, and you didn't quite know each month what you were doing. That's a bit of like how it is in the missionary world, and that's okay. That's part and parcel, but we need to get to at least 60% to be able to actually start further into the position that we've been called to do. And one of the traditional stumbling blocks in the mission world is for people to set a budget, which is usually a fairly reasonable budget, and then to be willing to live on half of it. And I've done that many times, and so I don't want to do that again. I think we can realize that the work we're doing is one of the most important works out there. Life is a vapor. We're called to spread the gospel, and everything is going to burn someday. But the fruit of working in God's kingdom will be everlasting. And so not to be ashamed of that, but to realize that that's a noble calling, and that it's okay for others to be asked to give a small portion towards that work. And as most missionaries know, it's often missionaries supporting missionaries.
Yeah.
Because we understand what it's like and the needs out there. So I'd like to see, I think the evangelical world is losing some of that teaching on churches aren't supporting missionaries as much as they used to, so it's falling more into individuals. So I'm hoping those individuals that God is calling will step forward, and some make it really easy. I've had a few people say, Darren, I know you're raising support. You don't even have to show me the thing. We're going to support you, just so you know.
That's great.
But I usually like to show them the presentation anyway, just so they're clear in what we're doing. So
yeah. Well, good. Well, Darren and Mary have a bio page on our website where you can give in Canada and you can give in the U.S. as well to support their ministry. There's also contact information on there for Darren and Mary, so you can join their prayer team too. So we encourage you to check it out at FIAIntl.org and search for Darren and Mary Cook. Darren, is there anything as we close out that you maybe we didn't cover that you wanted to share with the audience? Maybe some lasting words for somebody that is in a position where they're not sure if they want to go on a short-term missions trip. They're a little hesitant, either one to raise the funds to pay for the short-term trip, or even to leave the U.S. or leave Canada to try ministering in a different country.
Sure. I think if you're serious about your faith and want to follow the Lord, everyone should at least once do a short-term trip or longer, but you need to get out from under your culture and experiencing something different, something that maybe is uncomfortable, something that's going to help you see the need. Because every Christian is a missionary. Some of us are called to go more. We have maybe that gifting, but we're all called to be a part. So if you're not going, you should be sending. And if you're going to send, then you need to have gone once so you can at least understand why you're sending. So I would say there really, in my experience, everyone should make an effort to go at least once. And I've heard some people say they thought that would be the only time they went, and then they were hooked. But don't be ashamed. If you go once and you feel it's not your calling, let it be your calling to be a sender.
Good. Thank you, Darren. Well, I appreciate you being here with us today and sharing not only your backstory and your interesting cultural development, but also where God is taking you and Mary here with Friends in Action. So Darren grew up outside the Mennonite world, chose to enter it, and then with his wife Mary, chose to step towards something even harder, a life spent moving other people toward global missions. That is not a career arc anyone maps out on a spreadsheet. That's a life shaped by a series of deliberate yeses to faith, to community, to people around the world. People that we've never met. And now into a role that doesn't exist quite yet, but we're forming to able to reach more people through Canada. If you're ever considering a short-term mission trip, I want you to hear this. Darren was not a missionary. He was a person who said yes to going once, and that changed everything. If you've been thinking about going and just haven't pulled the trigger, I hope Darren's story is a picture of what's on the other side of that decision. And if you feel like you don't have what it takes, I want you to sit with what Darren is talking about from building the ministry that he's involved in and where God is taking him. He's not building it because he has all the answers. He's building it because he went, and going showed him the gap. If you want to come alongside Darren and Mary, if you want to be part of the funding that they've been building, reach out to us at FIA-USA@FIAINTL.org, and we can get you the connected information. Or you can see their bio on our website, FIAINTL.org. And if you're ready to go yourself, to take the kind of trip that started all of this for Darren, you can check us out at FIAINTL.org/go. There's opportunities around the world for you to engage in missions. That's Friends in Action International, moving Earth to share heaven. We'll see you next time, until all have heard.